Understanding the reasons behind our career choices helps us identify areas for improvement and create a more fulfilling life. These are the words of our guest today, Janice Fraser, and what she's really getting at is why work-life balance isn't really a thing. However, what is a true thing is the fact that you're one individual person and that you can't be split into two. So what affects you at the work front will affect you at home, and what affects you at home will affect you at work. So if you find yourself struggling to prioritize, if you find yourself struggling with the stresses of home, going to the office, or the stresses of the office coming with you home, which is more likely the case, know you're not alone. This affects everyone, all the leaders out there, all our subordinates out there. This affects us all. And that's why today's episode is so important. Now, with that, we go into a whole range of different topics, such as why work affects your energy and your life and vice versa, why work-life balance is a struggle to prioritize, different situations which require different approaches to adapt, how sometimes we overthink, yet we require balance, quality time, spirituality, and satisfaction in life, why we need to change our mindset to be effective for a better life, and why sometimes outcome-focused plans can allow flexibility for execution. So not only do we talk about work-life stuff, we get into a wider range of topics such as planning later, but it all, let me tell you, it all connects. Janice is a fantastic speaker. She's a coach. She's an author. And you're going to get a ton out of today's episode. So with that, why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation about powerful mindset shifts for maximizing your potential at work and in life with Janice Fraser. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Janice, welcome to the show, man. So good to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for having me.
So we were just chatting. And I stopped you like mid-sentence. You were like explaining something. I'm like, no. Let's dive into that topic we were talking about before I hit record. And that is this whole idea of work-life balance. Does that actually exist? And how might one achieve it? I'm dying to get your perspective on this. I have mine, but I'll let you go first.
I want to hear yours, but I mean, mine kind of starts a little bit controversially because I don't really believe in it. Like, not only do I think it's not a thing, I think it doesn't matter, right? Because it's all life, right? That's the thing. It's like, yes. I am one human. I have one set of energy. I sleep, and brush my teeth. And that applies whether I'm working or homing or whatever. And this idea that we can hyper compartmentalize effectively and super segment actually is false, even in some of the most extreme environments, right? So even if you think about like a highly secure environment, I do a lot of work with public sector people, in the federal government and whatever. And even with them, where you like turn in your cell phone on the way into your office, there's this reality, which is that the state of your mind and body comes with you wherever you go. And so what happens to you at work affects your life. What happens in the rest of your life affects your work. And so how we show up at work, what happens to us at work, the decisions we make at work, they affect the quality and the nature of our energy in our life wherever we go. And vice versa is also true, right? And so one of the things I think that the myth of work-life balance creates is that we're supposed to pretend that there is no crossover effect. And that causes us to not actually be kind of like operating from a mindful place of truth, right? So if I'm really mindful right now, I can tell you like how I'm feeling. My husband didn't sleep very well last night. I can tell you like his work life was affected by the fact that he didn't sleep very well last night, right? And if I'm mindful about myself, right, I've had a great day, a little bit like high strung and hyper. And so I know that when I, am done like with the evening chore, the like prepare the meal, eat the meal, clean the dishes, I'm going to crash really hard. And so having just realistic understanding of who we are and how we're conducting ourselves, like, that's part of, I have often said that being a leader is like being an elite athlete, right? And I manage my energy really consciously and mindfully. And so you can't be at, as you say, peak performance if you're not really being honest with yourself about what the truth is of what's going on. So yeah, so that's where I come from on it. And so it's just about being mindful and being appropriate for whatever the interaction and the challenges are of that current moment, whether that's a home moment or an office moment.
There's a lot of overlap between us and our thoughts. Because yes, I fully agree. I am only one person. And I'll also point out actually that I'm one of those folks that have to try to compartmentalize for their work, because by day I'm actually Canadian Army.
Yeah, right.
And up to not too long ago, I was one of those people that was dropping my cell phone. Actually, I left mine in my truck as I went into the office to go to work.
There we go. I did not know this about you, though, so that was not a plant.
So I was literally one of those, which is interesting because at lunchtime I would often come out to my truck, go for a coffee run, check my phone to see what the heck was going on in the quote unquote
in the regular world. Yep.
Right. To get, because you literally felt like you were in a black hole while you were at work. So, or in the office, I should say. So I fully agree with you that we're only one person. Family stuff affects work life. Work life totally affects family stuff. Yeah. But you can do your best. But guess what? At a certain point, it's going to spill over because, as you said eloquently, we are only one person. Where I think, and this is my opinion now, where I think people have mixed up work-life balance and the ideology of work-life balance is, that compartmentalization of thinking you can split yourself in half and be it. Rather, I think it's the balance aspect that people sometimes, to me, when we talk about work-life balance, to me, it's like, where does the priority go sometimes? Sometimes it's at the work front. So, for example, not this weekend coming, but next weekend coming is actually Canadian Thanksgiving, believe it or not.
Wow, early. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to actually work over that weekend. Right? So work, my balance is shifted towards work. Now, there are other times in my job, my current job, because I switched this summer, where I can come home early. There's opportunities for me to do that because of what's going on, i.e. not much. I have the flexibility to come home early. I have the flexibility to leave early when the opportunities arise. To me, that is what we need in work-life balance. The ability to adjust due to the circumstances going on and an acceptance of that. And not only just accepting it, but what's the word I'm looking for here? Encouraging it. Say, hey, go home early. Go ahead, take some time off because I need to count on you next week.
Yeah.
I need you to work. I need you to crunch some extra hours next week. So take the time now, do whatever it is you need to do to take care of your family, and go ahead and crunch these hours. So I'll go back to my last job. So my last job, where I couldn't have my phone and all this stuff, we're what's referred to as a high readiness unit. So we're literally some of the first people out the door in the event of something going on in the world.
Right.
So I would say that to my team all the time. I'm like, listen, if you got nothing going on, just say, hey, boss, I'm punking out, and go. Because
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm calling you. And when I call you, I don't know how long. I will tell you, I need you to go. I don't know for how long. And no, you can't let your family know where you're going.
Yeah.
So give
this
them
is
the flexibility.
Yeah, this is a great clarification and sort of like addition. There are all sorts of reasons why circumstances might have specific demands on people. So the situation you described is a very spiky kind of demand. And so you get rest, it's like being a new parent. You sleep while you can because you never know if you're going to sleep again ever. So as soon as you can sleep,
so true.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of situations like that. There are also situations where what either the family or the employer needs is absolute 100% predictability routine. And so this is why I think, especially those of us who think of ourselves as in leadership situations, we really need to be very clear about what is the situation and what is the best thing that this situation requires of me in order to be effective. And sometimes so I'm a very spiky worker. I work in bursts, and then I check out, and then I burst, and then I check out. And I have tuned that kind of over time. So I know if there's a job situation that is on paper looks perfect for me, but if it requires that I am steady, constant, reliable, dependable, every day the same, that will not be a good fit. So that would be a great fit for my husband, right? Like, he is also my co-author in the book. And so like part of what we need to know is how to be very clear with ourselves about what works for us, and how to be very clear with ourselves about what the situation requires. And if there's a gap between those two things, what the situation requires and what I'm capable of, let's say what I'm gifted at, then I need to find a way to compensate and manage. So when I think about finding that balance, what I take away is work life. I always think about balance. There's this thing that someone taught me, like, okay, I'm going to tell you the honest truth. In 1996, I went to Burning Man. I was young, I was newly divorced, and I hired a personal organizer to help me get my act together after the divorce. And she introduced me to this thing that I called the life pie. Anyway, the Burning Man things, I met her at Burning Man. I met a personal organizer in 1996 at Burning Man at an RV. And she changed my life. She gave me this thing that I call a life pie. So you can imagine a pie chart right here. Imagine a pie chart.
Yeah.
Each one of these wedges each one of these wedges of pie is like another component of life. So like financial security, physical well-being, mental health, spiritual connectedness, loved ones, community, right? So you got 8 wedges of pie. And I would do this check-in with myself every day. And I did it every day for about 10 years. I did check it. How am I doing at each one of these things? And so when I look for balance, I look for, am I over-rotated into one of these sections? Is there something that I'm neglecting? If like my loved one's line is really low, like, oh, okay, maybe I need to, whatever, call my mom, whatever. But in doing this over and over again, part of what I found is that I overthink things. And so my like intellectual satisfaction would be like off the charts. And my like, what I label spirituality, which includes like, go have fun, let off some steam, walk in the woods, make a painting, like something like that. Like that was always neglected. And so what I needed to remember to find balance is not about how I spend my time. It's about the quality of the time that I spend, and how do I choose what to spend my time on? And, it's really worked well for me to keep my kind of operating system for my whole life really in a good zone. And part of what that led me to was to think about, why do I work? What do I get out of work besides just money? Like, what is the exchange of work? And as a person who's done public service, like, that's not about the money. Like, you're not doing it to get rich, right? You're doing
Definitely
it.
not.
Right. There's meaning there. There's a sense of, most of the service people that I know are doing it in part because they really care about the mission and they feel compelled to do public service in some way. And so, like, you're getting something else out of it. You're getting community, or you're getting meaning, or you're getting intellect, and money, right? So when we stop thinking about work-life balance, we can start thinking about, well, why do I do the work that I do? What do I get out of it? Why is this particular situation better than the last situation that I had? Why was the last situation bad? It just helps us know what it is that we need to do next in order to be really, really effective and create a life that we want to live.
Yeah, I did not expect us to go down this route with this this interview, to be honest, but I'm loving it. The thing I hear so often, now I have multiple groups I run. I run a free Facebook group, leadership skills for managers who want to be leaders, not bosses. That's a free one. I also run a mastermind community, which is a paid one.
Right.
It's called the Leader Growth Mastermind. We go through content and we have weekly calls and all that stuff. We do something very similar to what you talked about in the pie chart, which I may have to look at in more detail because I might, borrow it.
Please take it. That's why I put it in a book.
Yeah, absolutely right. But in the free group, often I hear things from leaders in there is that, oh, I hate, I'm miserable at my job.
Yeah.
Work sucks.
Yeah.
Those type of ideal, and I sit there because unfortunately, fortunately, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, depends on how you want to look at it, I can't relate. Because I joined the Army straight out of high school when I was 18, and I've loved it ever since. And you're right, like there's this higher calling. That's why I joined at such an early age. It's not about the money, although the money's not bad, and the benefits are good and all that stuff. Yep. But putting your life on the line, and do you put a dollar figure to that?
Right, really. Right. There's like, let's talk about balance.
Yeah, right. So I can't understand these people who have this innate feeling that they just, they feel drowning. They feel, life getting sucked out of them. They don't enjoy what they're doing. Is there a way for them to find that joy without necessarily changing their situation? Like, that's it. Here's my 2 weeks notice. I'm out of here. Can they actually potentially find it where they're at now so that they can turn that mentality around?
Well, so I'll tell you a story to start the answer to that question. I was an independent consultant in the late 90s. So I worked at Netscape right at the heart of the internet revolution, like right when it was happening. I was in the middle of it, and my career was exciting. And I left Netscape to be an independent consultant at a time when nobody I knew really was an independent consultant. So for me, I was jumping off a cliff, and it was this big, bold move and whatever. And I found myself a couple years into that life, and I was working with a company that no longer exists, huge Silicon Valley company at the time, as a consultant. And I had been there for 14, 15 months. And they were my main source of income. And I didn't actually table flip, but I probably would have if I could have gotten away with it. And I literally stood up and I said, I so fucking quit. I don't know if it's okay to F-bomb on your show, but I did, I said those words out loud, and I was like, on the drive home, I had 40-minute drive home. On the drive home, I was like, what am I doing? Am I this trapped in this job that am I this stuck that I have to suffer? And, I have this, I don't know where I got it from, but I have this lifelong belief that I don't deserve to suffer. Not that I think my life should always be roses. I kind of want to I want to stop suffering for dumb things so that I can do the harder things that mean so much more to me. Right. So it's kind of I trade the dumb suffering for the better suffering, but I keep myself kind of on that edge. Anyway, that's for my therapist to help me figure out. But what I realized in that moment, and probably other galvanizing moments, is that I have choice, and that I don't ever want to get to that point where I make such a I need to make a drastic change. So one of the things I like about this life pie kind of setup, and there are tons of models like it out there. I didn't invent this. I just love it. Is that if you look at a wider range of factors of life, you can identify what it is that's lacking and what it is that's overtaxed. And you can make small adjustments. And as you start to practice the habit of making small adjustments and nurture yourself in these ways, you just become more effective across the board. There's just this, like, you just kind of like, it's not that the highs are higher, it's that the lows aren't quite as low, right? And so instead of making these rash decisions out of a place of desperation, which is kind of where I was when I said that, because, like, nobody says that if they're, feeling in control of their life. So rather than making big sweeping moves out of a sense of desperation, you make much more effective moves from a place of opportunity. And that kind of mindset change has to happen a little bit at a time over a long period of time, and starting to see the agency that we have over our own situation, over our team situations, like putting this into leadership context. Like, how can I make it better for my group so that my group can be as effective as possible? Whether that is, executing on a military mission or, creating a product roadmap at your tech startup, right? How can we help ourselves and our group be more effective to get more of what we want out of our life? Like, I want every one of us to have a life filled with confidence, security, love, and meaning. Because if you have those things, everything else comes along, right? Confidence, security, love, and meaning can happen at every price point, in every context. And from that point of view, once we have that opportunity, once we're in that position, we just are much more effective leaders.
That's a fantastic response. Do you ever feel alone, lost, or you're just not good enough as a leader? You know what? You're not alone. Many of us struggle with those feelings, especially when we're new to leadership or facing new challenges in our roles. But you don't have to go alone. It's where our Leader Growth Mastermind comes in. Our community is specifically designed for leaders who are looking to grow, develop, and most importantly, thrive. Our weekly curated content, group coaching calls, and a safe and supportive community is where you can connect with other leaders who are facing similar challenges. Whether you're dealing with imposter syndrome, feeling overwhelmed by the demands of leadership, or simply looking to connect with a community of like-minded individuals, the Leader Growth Mastermind is here to support you. So why not join us? Take that first step in becoming the leader you're meant to be. Visit lead.boss.com/mastermind to learn more and sign up and join our community today. Together, we can grow, learn, and achieve our full potential as leaders. And again, that is lead.boss.com/mastermind. Can't wait to see you there. And now, back to the show. Absolutely,
I don't even remember what the question was.
That's what happens when you do great answers, right? Because you just you just keep going. But it makes a lot of sense. So what I heard out of you is make those minor changes. Make sure that your slices of pie, look at them, see what's out of balance, and bring them back into balance, so that these big this I hate my life thing isn't actually so drastic. And you're like, okay, I'm not so happy here at work, but this part of me is good. Okay, let's get this part. Okay, wait now. Oh, there's an opportunity here at work for me to work on this project. Oh, that's actually interesting. oh, it's really important to me. Oh, they want to do community outreach. Well, that's a value of mine. And then,
Right.
you look for those opportunities. But if everything is down and clouds, you don't see those opportunities because everything's out of whack, and you're not open to it because you're tunnel vision how miserable you are. So make those
Absolutely.
minor
It's, I have this person in my life who's, I would say, one of my greatest advisors. Her name is Wendy. And one of the things that Wendy says is make it smaller. Just make it smaller. Because it's so many huge problems or challenges or situations can be broken down to much smaller chunks. And when we don't feel empowered at the big level, like my life is out of control, I'm miserable at work, my boss sucks, this is terrible. If we can make it smaller, then we have more power over that small thing. And when we have power over the small things cumulatively, that's actually quite a lot of power. So the more I think of that state as being on tilt. So a leader who is on tilt is never going to make the best decisions for their people or for the kind of outcomes that we're striving for, whether that's a profit outcome or a mission outcome. So if we can manage that sense of feeling powerless, frustrated, angry, right? If we can take all of that and just like make it smaller, even if it just means just for today, what is one thing that I can do to move this thing forward? And you do that every day, suddenly you've got 30 days of moving something forward just a little bit. And that's kind of a lot of movement. So make it smaller has really been a helpful piece of advice for me.
It's kind of along the lines of the 1% theory. Are you aware of that?
No, the 1% theory that I know is about wealth distribution. So I think you mean something else.
Yeah, totally something different. I believe it's out of James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. 1% better every day.
1% better every day, which is actually a lot. So I made it 0.01. Like just a tiny bit better every day over time. Yeah.
Same principle. And the problem thing is, I always use the metaphor, well, how do you eat an elephant? Everyone's like, I don't know. How do you eat an elephant? Like, who eats elephants? Like, one bite at a time, just like everything else, right? It's a big problem, but you look at it and like, okay, it's one bite at a time. How might we break this down? Okay, well, let's take the front right leg first. You take that care of that, and then you move on to the next, and eventually you're through the trunk. And it's kind of probably like people. Hopefully, there's no one eating listening to this podcast episode right now because they're probably just throwing up. But the moral of the story is that big problems go into little problems. They're just and if you can go ahead and take care of the little stuff, the big stuff will come.
Well, and for me, that connects really tightly with the idea that we should do everything right, that we should have the right plan, right? Is this the right plan? Do we all agree this is the right plan? That kind of thinking gets us into a lot of trouble because the answer is, who knows if it's the right plan, and does it really matter? So sometimes we avoid eating the elephant, just to belabor that, right? We avoid that because we think, I need a plan for that. I need to know exactly how it's going to go, and I need to know that I've chosen the right plan, right? And I really want to let go of all that pressure to be right, for everyone to agree. None of that is necessary. And what it means is that we don't start. So it's like, if there's a thinker in the startup world, a guy named Eric Ries, who wrote a book called Lean Startup that was very influential for a long time. It still is. It's just one of the best books ever written, I think. And he says, build, measure, learn, right? That's how you figure out how to make your startup. You build the thing, you see how it does, you learn from that, you make a different version. So you do these small iterative cycles that help you, that help a plan forward, a path forward emerge. And in situations where you have a lot of unknowns and situations that are highly dynamic, this is the antidote to the kind of the analysis paralysis that you get from trying to plan perfectly and trying to reach consensus before you take any action. So instead of that, you can say, I'm going to try and tackle this problem one bite at a time. And as we go, we're going to learn things. So I'm going to be careful to notice what is it that we've learned and how do we want to adjust our path forward from there. So taking the one bite at a time, having an emergent path, all of that works if you put the learning cycle in there, right? That closed learning loop where you're like, I did a thing. What did that mean? And how are we going to adjust our plan based on what we learned from that?
I really like that. One of the things I find from my perspective is that a lot of leaders end up in that analysis paralysis and over planning and stuff like this because they have this fear.
Yeah.
They have the fear that they're tied to the decision once the decision is made. And often when I coach and this comes up, I'm like, and I was working with a client once and he was talking about this and then he was saying, we made the decision. Lo and behold, information came out. We had made the wrong one, but we still had to go through because we had, went down that path. I'm like, time out. Stop. He was like, what? Why? I'm like, what did you just say? He's like, well, we made the decision with the plan that we had developed, some new information. I'm like, stop there. When new information comes out, you have a new situation. And therefore, you have a new decision to make. It's right.
Yes.
But people get tunnel vision. They believe they need to stick to it. Like, oh, my credibility is going to be affected. I'm like, no, your credibility is not going to be affected. In fact, it'll go higher if you go, hey, we made a decision. We found out that that wasn't necessarily the right one. So we're adjusting course.
Yeah.
And we're going in this direction.
There's a technique that my husband and I really love to release the pressure to execute according to plan. Like I have a real problem with planning culture, actually, but we don't need to go down that rat hole. But to release the pressure to execute according to the exact plan, you make the plan's final accomplishment. You frame that as an outcome instead of as a deliverable, for instance, right? So one of the startups that I advise is literally building a Mach 9 space plane, right? Like super ambitious. Female founder, husband-wife founding team, used to be at Virgin Orbit, like just really amazing. Her outcome for that first year that they were in business was one of them. She had 3 outcomes. One of them was make fire. Not like build the version 1 rocket, deliver version 3 rocket, No, it was make fire. We need to use this technology to ignite an engine. That's it. Make fire. It was so clear and so focused, and they were able to execute on it without having to worry about, did we take every step we promised? Did we, build every version of the rocket we anticipated? Like none of that mattered. What mattered was the result, the outcome. So if you frame your plans in terms of outcomes, then you can flex on all the steps and delivery and activities that you do, and even the timing, as long as you get to the result within the time frame. And so it's one of these like super small changes that represents a whole lot of stepping out of a whole lot of patterned behavior around, no, I delivered on plan, on budget, right? But I flew us right into the side of a mountain. But that's what the plan said to do, right? So, So I feel like the outcome focus can lift us out of a lot of the planning. I don't know, what is that called? Like when we all believe a thing, but it's not actually the thing. Yeah, the group think. Yep.
Yeah. So we refer in the military that outcome that you refer to, we call that the desired end state. Yes. Where do we want to, when we execute this plan, where do we want to end? Which the ironic part about this whole conversation right now is that we're now talking about my new job where I'm actually an instructor for one of our planning courses for Army officers. So it's quite funny. Yes. It's quite fitting. But this is exactly where we're at. We talk about the desired end state, where it is. What is the outcome that we want to achieve?
Love it.
And right. And then we work our way backwards of, okay, how might we go about fixing it or achieving that? We're like, okay, we need to do this step. We need to do that step before that. Okay, before we achieve this, we need to have these things in place and so on and so forth. And we go through that. And
yeah, go ahead. No, you first.
So by the end, you have this plan. Now, we have a saying, no plan survives contact, i.e., once you execute, it's not going to go according to plan. But you look at ways to mitigate those risks. You look at ways to adjust, to be able to adjust on the fly. You look at these, what we refer to as branch plans or sequel plans, depending if it goes really well. And we look at these different ways to mitigate, because we know it's not going to go exactly to plan. It never does.
Right.
But without a plan, then that what happens, what we've learned through time, literally centuries, is that without the plan, then no one knows which direction to go. So
Right.
at least you give the people the direction to move in and understand, okay, this is where we're going. And most importantly, the understanding why we're going in that direction. Therefore, they're going to be able to make the best decisions within their sphere. So having that outcome, make fire.
Yeah.
So having that, make fire, no doubt our engineers are showing up like, I'm not sure exactly what to do today, but I'm working towards making fire with this engine.
Right.
And that's the way it went. Now, go ahead.
Well, so there's so many lovely thoughts in what you just said. I love it. And one of the thoughts that I have is that you're changing how you think about what a plan is. So I think that we're taught early in our careers to consider a plan a set of promises and commitments that we're making to one another. That's not what a plan is. A plan is a best guess based on our current understanding of how best to accomplish those outcomes you're talking about. That desired end state, it's the answer to your how might we question. That's not a set of promises, right? It's a set of best guesses. So do you in the Army have something like the OODA loop, or is that just an Air Force thing? Because I don't want to mix my armed services here.
No, we stole it. Don't worry. We stole it.
So if you haven't heard of the OODA loop, OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. And that's the situation where you have a plan, you're executing according to plan, you do a thing, it doesn't survive that first contact. And so you observe that. You kind of get clear on what is true. That's the orient step. You decide what that means, and then you plan your next action, right? And so what the OODA loop reminds us to do, so we're kind of always in an OODA loop. And what we're trying to do there is just perceive what is the new information that might help us make a plan, like adjust our plan to get to that outcome in a better, more efficient way.
Eloquently said.
Yeah. That's what I think leaders do, right?
100%. 100%. I like how you referred to plan as not being a set of parameters. I look at it's a guide.
Yeah.
It's not it's not the thou shall must do this, but rather we believe this is what is going to transpire, and this is how we foresee you doing whatever it is needs to be done. So here we go.
But when we think about what are the tools of people management, right? The tools of people management include how do we set goals? What are our OKRs or OGSMs or whatever your goaling mechanism is? How do we hold people accountable? What do we celebrate, value, recognize, and reward? And so often all of that is written according to the plan. It's written in such a way that says, if I deliver exactly what the plan says on time, on budget, I get rewarded. And I think that that's very true in the Department of Defense. And getting out of that mindset and into a mindset that said it's not the steps in the plan that matter. It's the outcomes that cumulatively lead to a mission result. That's what we want to reward and recognize, not that I did this step according to the budget and according to the time frame. And so when we think about reframing goal setting and leadership, it can get really mechanical, like HR team. Like, what is the relationship between HR and being a leader, right? Like, that's actually a really interesting question, because if your people are getting rewarded for one thing, but you perceive good as something else, you're in conflict with the system, and it can cause a lot of confusion and chaos. So again, is like that sense of like holistic mindfulness. Like, nobody wants to live in a system that is giving them mixed messages, right? That's frustrating and upsetting, and it causes cognitive dissonance, and it makes it hard to make a decision, and it delays decision making, especially on the part of the individual contributor who's having to interpret, do I go this way because that's what my goals say, or do I go that way because that's what, my boss really believes is right. And I, by the way, do too. So, yeah.
Which then affects right back to the beginning of this entire conversation, taking your slices of the pie, putting them out of whack, making you question what the heck's going on at work, getting frustrated because of the disconnect, as you had mentioned, and then you get frustrated, you go home and you accidentally take it on your kids because you're frustrated and you never took time to de-stress, let that steam off before you walk through the door.
Yeah, so you would just have no resilience for when it takes them forever to get the dishes washed.
Exactly.
That would be my formerly teenage son. I used to get so frustrated. So I'm sorry, Evan. Janice, I don't mean to be saying bad things behind your back. Don't put his name out there.
This has been such an amazing conversation, one which I've enjoyed and did not expect to go down these routes. Before we wrap up, I got a couple last questions for you.
Yep.
The first being the question I asked all the guests here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, and that's according to you, Janice. What makes a great leader?
What makes a great leader? I can tell you a couple things a great leader does. Is that okay? Yes. I'm going to say that's going to be my answer. Here are things that great leaders do. There are a couple of them. One, they orient honestly. They're like, where are we right now? What makes this moment complicated? Are we all here in the same understanding together? Then they value outcomes, like we were just talking about. They leverage the brains that are around them in an effective way, and they make decisions that last. We call that durable decisions. And what we've seen is that to respond to kind of modern challenges, these are 4 things that great leaders do consistently.
That's a different answer, but it's a great answer, no less. So,
because honestly, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to what makes a great leader. I don't know. I just know what I've seen.
Is there one? That's a great thing about the question and answering.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many guests I've had on the show. It's probably in the range of 150, 200-ish. But I don't think a single person's given the exact same answer.
Yeah.
And I've been asking.
Yeah, people who help others get things done. Yeah.
Yeah. Every guest I've asked this question to. So, hey,
it's a great question.
Fun. It is. And the final question, not so crazy, but hey, still important, is how can people find you, follow you, be part of your journey? Shameless plug for you. Have at it.
Shameless plug. Awesome. The best way is to search for the title of our book because it's pretty memorable. Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama. How to make extraordinary progress wherever you lead. But Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama. I'm on Instagram. I'm active on Instagram. I'm active on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. And you can find me at janicefraser.com, JANICEFRASER.com.
And for you, the listener, it's easy as always. You just need to go to show notes, and the show notes for all the episodes have the same format. You go to leaddon'tboss.com/the episode number, and the links are always there in the show notes. So Janice, again, thank you for coming, taking time out of your busy schedule, and having this fantastic conversation with me today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel
would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.